have all heard the adage, some things are probably better off unsaid. We've all been in that situation where we probably have tried to articulate something, and it's normally something we're passionate about or we really believe in, and it just, the way we presented it just didn't hit home. I know I've been in that situation before. I'm sure you have as well. And I think Brian Kelly last night with his one-on-one interview with Jacques Doucet, a local Baton Rouge news reporter who I think does a year-to-year interview with the LSU head coach. I think Brian Kelly's probably sitting there afterwards, probably like, probably could have articulated that a little better. But I am your host, Dave Shumate, and welcome to the SEC Unfiltered platform. Before we get started, guys, do not forget to check out our partner in crime, MyBookie. Go to mybookie.ag and use the code SECU at sign up to receive a special welcome offer on your first deposit. We got the NBA playoffs going on right now. We got college baseball heating up. We got SEC tournament in about 2 weeks down in Hoover, then SEC regionals. Golf still going on. I'm sure there's a ton of stuff you could bet on, specifically with just college football and college basketball being over. But there's still plenty of stuff to get your hands on. Go visit our friends over at mybookie.ag. But in case you missed the clip, and unless you've been living under a rock, I don't know how you could have missed this on Twitter or X last night. Let me play it for you. I'm going to get it off our guys, what's his name? Carter Power Bryant. We're going to use his tweet from the interview with Jacques Doucet. Let me share it on the screen here. Let's get it played. Let's start playing it right here.
So the D-line, interior D lineman, where are you right now with that?
Well, I think I made it pretty clear in a number of the press conferences that I had that we were in the market in recruiting in the transfer portal looking for defensive linemen. It hasn't fared very well, quite frankly, because, we're selling something a little bit differently, and that is we want to recruit, we want to engage, build relationships, we want to develop, retain, and have success. We're not in the market of buying players, and unfortunately, right now, that's what some guys are looking for. They want to be bought, and look, I understand NIL is part of this, and we have an incredible collective. We have very, very generous opportunities around the greater Baton Rouge area for NIL opportunities. So they are here, but we're not going to go out and buy players. That's not what this is about. This was never about that. We will develop you. We will get you ready for the next step, as we did with Jaden Daniels, as we did with Malik Neighbors, as we did with Brian Thomas. We developed 3 defensive linemen that all got drafted this year, and we'll do that again. But if you're just looking to get paid, you're looking in the wrong place. If you like all the things that we do here in developing our players, bringing you into a championship program, playing in front of the best fan base in America, playing for championships, and having an opportunity for NIL, you should be a Tiger. But if you just want to get, paid, this is not the place for you.
Appreciate using Carter Bryant's Twitter on that. But you heard it. Brian Kelly with his interview with Jacques Doucet. And initially what comes off is, why say that? Why say that? Let's sit there and let's soak that in. Let's let that marinate. Why say that? Let me preface first by saying I like Brian Kelly. I think Brian Kelly is the guy to keep LSU in the playoff contention year in, year out. They should be making the playoffs at least 4 of every 5 years. Worst case, 3 out of every 5 years. He's going to have them consistently in the playoffs, especially with it moving to a 12-team playoff. But why? I want to let that marinate with the audience here. Why do you say that? He isn't wrong, and I think most people would agree with him. But it's just not the reality we live in. He knows that. And I know, he's not going to come out there and say, we're open to buying people. Get in the portal. We will buy you. We're looking for a disruptive interior defensive tackle. He can't straight up come out and say that from a PR standpoint. He's just not going to do it. And I don't even think Brian Kelly truly believes what he is saying is we're not buying kids. I think he understands, he probably knew. I mean, his SID and him probably got prepped before this interview with Jacques. And we're like, hey, they're probably going to ask you about the misses on the defensive line, especially in the portal in the winter and spring portals. Now that those are all wrapped up, they're going to ask you about that. So I'm sure he's gotten a note of that. It's speaking engagements. He's probably been asked that by big donors, big people calling him on the side, asking what's going on. If he's on social media at all, which I don't know if Brian Kelly is, he sees it. It's talked about a lot when previewing LSU's 2024 season. I think he understands it. Like, hey, look, I can't come out and say we are going to buy people, but he understands they bought people. Hell, their two best defensive linemen the past 2 years were guys that they quote unquote bought that they got from the portal. Mekhi Wingo coming over from Missouri, and then Jordan Jefferson, who they got from West Virginia, were they're the top two productive inside guys. I know Mason Smith was drafted higher, but Mason Smith was outside of the first series outside of a few snaps. I mean, he played the first series against Florida State in 22, and then really kind of never recovered from that in 2023 and was very inconsistent. But those were probably their two most consistent guys, Mekhi Wingo and Jordan Jefferson. They were quote unquote, as Brian Kelly put it, bought. They got him from the portal. I mean, Mekhi Wingo, a 2021 All-SEC freshman guy. They knew what they were doing from that standpoint. So I don't understand why he's saying that, because I can go back 2 years and contradict what he was saying. He didn't go to LSU. Mekhi Wingo or Jordan Jefferson didn't go to LSU for free. Let's call a spade a spade. But to my initial point, why come out and say it like that? I'm sure a little bit of him regrets being like, I shouldn't have straight up came out and said that. I straight up shouldn't have came out and said we're not buying players. And again, you can't come out the opposite end of the spectrum too and say, hey, business is open. Business is booming. We're open. We're open to go buy players. You can't say that either. But don't come in today's time. Have a little bit of awareness. You can't come out in today's time in the 2024 college football ecosystem and say that. You come off as a broke program. And when I say a broke program, it means your collective feels like you're essentially saying, hey, we don't really have enough money to go out there and really pay for those guys. And I know some of it is he's probably like, hey, I'm not willing to go pay some of these guys what I think they're worth. The guys like Dominic Williams and Simeon Barrow from Michigan State. He may be big, hey, look, I don't want to pay that. I don't think they're worth that. It's just fair. I probably agree with him. I probably agree with him, but you still come off to the casual observer. It's just you're a broke program. And teams that you're recruiting against in the portal, say another Walter Nolan gets in the portal next year in the winter, hits the portal late November, early December in 2024 when the season's broken. And they just go play in that video. Hey, man, we ain't really going to pay. Now, I know you can make that up in conversations and, hey, money talks. If they have a big contract in front of you, hey, screw that video Brian Kelly had back in May of 2024. Now he's putting his money where his mouth is. And I'm sure that would be the case. But why put that out there for teams to go use against you negatively? I don't get that. So those are the 2 points that come to mind. What's the benefit of saying it? I don't really see any benefit, but the negative is you sound like you really don't have your ducks in a row from an NIL perspective. It looks like you're not really willing to spend money in an era where you have to spend. And teams are going to use it against you negatively when they're recruiting against you. But let me break down how the spring portal window really happens. You can get wide receivers offensively and get running backs. You can get tight ends. You can get corners. You can get safeties. You can get linebackers in the spring portal. You can do that. There's a plethora of them out there. But you aren't going to go get an offensive tackle, much less a disruptive interior defensive lineman without paying the cost. And that cost is going to go up more so in the spring portal because the demand is higher than it's ever been throughout the other calendar year. Everybody's looking for disruptive defensive linemen and offensive tackles, but specifically in this conversation with LSU, defensive tackles. You can maybe even throw in their lack of secondary corner guys they brought into the program for 2024. But yeah, like when you're going to go look for spring defensive tackles in the spring portal, you're probably going to go pay a little more for a guy that's really probably not that good, or a guy you didn't have to pay X amount for if he was in the winter or the first initial transfer portal. You're just not going to have to do that. But hey, these people are business people as well now. They know like, hey, they really need me. So they're going to pay a little more, even though they may not think I may be overall worth it, but I have all the leverage here. That's the way the kids and their parties operate. And that's business. It's capitalism. But most good programs, I wouldn't say most, all good programs are retaining their better players, specifically at those positions of need. So the true difference makers on the interior aren't even hitting the portal in the spring. Then you have the ones that are probably just winnable to winnable minus guys. Guys, essentially, let me put it in summary if you don't know my terminology, if you haven't watched my stuff before. That's how I grade players, is a winnable plus, rare, all league rare. That's how we used to do it at Georgia. So I kept that here as I continue to evaluate guys in my media side of things. But anyways, I think those two guys really, the Dominic Williams and Simeon Barrow guys, are just winnable minus guys. You can't win because of them, but they can assist you in winning. They'll help you win. But they're not those big difference makers. That's probably where LSU didn't want to go spend that money on that standpoint. But again, that's what you're getting in the spring portal window. It just is what it is. And I also think Brian Kelly sounded frustrated a little in this interview in regards to the portal and the defensive line recruiting. I mentioned it. I'm sure him and his SID prep for it. He knew this question was going. He mentioned that, yeah, I'm very aware we've struggled. I addressed this in the spring. He understands they have not recruited well. They're outside of bringing in, if you really go back to his 2022 class, 2023 class, really can't talk about the 24 class yet because either they went through a spring or they'll be getting there here in a couple of weeks. But really, his first 2 real signing classes, and really 22 you can't put all on Brian Kelly because he just got in there. But their best defensive line takes are 2 guys they quote unquote bought, as Brian Kelly would use the term bought. Mekhi Wingo was a transfer from Missouri, and Jordan Jefferson was a transfer from West Virginia. They have not done a good job on the high school level. They haven't. It is what it is. This all starts with the mismanagement of the roster on the interior defensive line position. In the 2022 class, remember, not all Brian Kelly's fault, but it is what it is. Quincy Wiggins, I don't even remember. He's at Colorado now. Ty'G Hill, the other kid they signed on the interior defensive line, I think he's at Oregon State now. Moving to the 2023 class, these are the high school kids they've signed in his first 2 real classes, not counting 2024. Deshaun Womack, a little bit more of an edge guy. I don't even count him as an interior defensive lineman. Dylan Carpenter, hadn't really been keeping up with him, but I don't think he's a guy they see in their future plans. Oh, Jordan Jefferson, a guy who they bought, and then Paris Shan. So really, the guys you're hitting on the most are the portal guys, the defensive linemen you're getting out of the portal. You haven't done a good job through the high school ranks. But in a program like LSU, to go compete for championships, Brian Kelly used the term compete for championships, you have to sign and hit on your high school interior defensive linemen. Then you have to develop them. I think they have the right coach in there to do it, Bo Davis. I like Blake Baker, the coordinator. They also brought in Corey Raymond on the back end. I like Kevin Peoples, their defensive ends coach. They have good coaches they brought in. They just mismanage the defensive line from a high school roster standpoint where they can go develop those guys. Like I mentioned, just develop. Then you have to go pay and retain them. You got to keep them on your roster. I think now some of this could be blamed to Jamar Cain from people I've talked to close to the LSU program. The former defensive line coach, I think he's with the Denver Broncos now in the NFL. His lack of ability to recruit, not going to go put a bunch of different hooks out there outside of the top guys, I think is hurt Brian Kelly in his first couple of years at LSU. Now, can he make it up? Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think he's the guy at LSU. I just think he's off to a rough start from a defensive personnel standpoint. That side of the ball has been mismanaged from a roster personnel standpoint. I don't know how you could argue it. Doesn't mean Brian Kelly's going to fail or get fired at LSU. There's plenty of time to get this fixed. But let's call a spade a spade. They've not done a good job from a personnel standpoint on the defensive side of the ball. And from an NIL standpoint, I've heard a little bit of LSU trying to use this boot Louisiana tax on the in-state kids, on the Louisiana kids, and aren't paying them as much because they probably feel like, hey, you should come to LSU. It's a prideful thing. You should stay in state. Therefore, we're not going to pay you as much because you have, Brian Kelly mentioned it, other NIL opportunities around the greater Baton Rouge area, maybe even New Orleans area, where they could go get their name out because LSU is the only state school. They're not competing against Tulane and stuff like that. It's a private school. But maybe that should change. Maybe you should just offer everybody on the roster just a strict $35,000 base. Maybe that's affecting them getting the best potential high school defensive lineman out there. I'm not saying that. I don't know. Is it? Could that be part of the issue? Sure. But I do know one thing. They have not done a good enough job in regards to LSU's expectations. And I think you ask any LSU fan, it's to win the SEC, now go to the playoff. With it being a 12-team playoff, they expect to be there every year, as they should, and they should be. They have to start doing a better job evaluating. I wouldn't even say developing yet, because I think their coaches that they brought in, all the 4 coaches I just mentioned are great coaches that are going to get the most out of the players they have there. LSU may struggle on defense this year, and I think they will, but I think those 4 new coaches are going to get the most out of those guys. It's not going to be anybody's fault but Brian Kelly's for mismanaging the defensive personnel right off the bat early in his tenure. It can be fixed. It can be fixed. That leads me to my final question. Should LSU fans be concerned? No, Brian Kelly shouldn't concern you because, like I mentioned, I think he's the guy for the job. But the NIL collective plan, overall roster management strategy, whatever you want to call it, needs to change if they want to win at the level that LSU fans expect and should expect to in today's college football landscape. Again, I appreciate you joining us on this segment of SEC Unfiltered platform. Again, it's all SEC things, 24/7, 365. Hit the like, notification bell. You don't want to miss any of the content we have coming at you here all the time. Again, I'm your host, Dave Shumate. You have a phenomenal day.